that triggers it, because the permit is considered by definition highly speculative. You do not know, even if you have spent all the money in the world, whether or not the DEC or the EPA are going to give you a permit for anything. Many a hydroelectric dam has had millions and millions of dollars spent on getting the rights and the engineering and never got the permit. They didn't get rights to put up a dam merely because they spent the money. So there could be a change in law. This industry is somewhat unique, particularly in New York, but the current state of the law is it's the issuance of the permit that triggers the right.
Hold on, I just wanted to kind of try to find the right balance here, guys, between sticking with this discussion and moving forward, because I know there are other questions. Is this a follow-up to the current conversation?
But my question is like this. So what's the point actually of going for moratorium? If it's not going to... Sorry. What's the point of going for moratorium when actually you don't get a permanent ban? And you don't know how it's going to, what we're going to actually achieve with the, moratorium. If we're going to go for that, then it's better to go for the ban, right? Because why would we want to... I mean, it's a waste of time and a waste of energy to go for the moratorium. We should go for the ban and actually achieve something. Because if you go for the moratorium, you basically just get something not permanently done. Then you're doing the same thing again.
Yeah, that's not really... Yeah, go ahead.
So the question was, why not just go for the ban and don't waste your time in the moratorium? If we were to ban gas drilling in the town of Caroline, would not prohibit trucks that were drilling in neighboring towns from driving through our town to get gravel, to get water, to get whatever they need. So we still need a road preservation law. If it turns out we have a gas pipeline that runs just outside our town or through our town, we need to connect to, then we still need to come up with a decision on pipelines. If it turns out that they want to run those pipelines through critical environmental areas, we still need to have developed critical environmental areas. If it turns out that they decide, because we're so close to 6 Mile Creek always runs with water all the time. It's a good place to flush their tanks that they're working with their toxic waste or their production materials. Then they can come to the town of Caroline. All those things can happen even if we do have a ban. So the importance for having a moratorium is to give the town breathing room to address all these issues, including a ban for all these issues, because many of these things can happen to the town whether or not a ban takes place. A ban doesn't stop them from working in and around our town. So that's the reason for doing it. And a moratorium gives us an opportunity for breathing room. And Guy danced around the issue really, really well tonight. But in my conversations with him, he's confided in me that a moratorium is something that is fairly, as he said, that doesn't have all the effect of a real strong law. At the same time, it's a legally defendable position. It's produced, we have the authority to do it under several different statutes, including the New York State Constitution. So it's something that's our right to do, and we're doing it for reasons that are not speculative, but real things we have to deal with. So his advice to me was that a moratorium is the proper avenue to take to address all these issues, because we know that at this point in time, the DEC is not expected to take any more comments on gas drilling. Sometime within the year, they may start issuing a permit. So we should be working on all these issues now, so that whenever permits are issued in Candor or in Dryden or wherever they're issued, or Danby, then we are in a position to have addressed all these things that I just mentioned. So that's the reason that we're considering it. And if it turns out that the town decides that it wants to do a ban, we have a year to work on it, maybe less. We'll have the results probably of Middlefield and Dryden, the first go through. So we'll see, how the judges read the law, what they understand to be important, so that if the town decides to put together a ban, we consider it and develop legislation that be based on as much information as we can possibly have, so it's stronger. The point was raised: do we want to pass a ban? If we don't pass any of these laws, it'd be even a moratorium. We set ourselves up for a lawsuit. It's our job as town board members to be fiduciarily responsible and to do the best we can with as much knowledge as we can. And so that's the reason for having this meeting tonight. Try to learn from you about the issues that are important to us, so that whenever we're working over the next year, we work on those. So that's a long-winded answer. I guess I'll stand next to Guy to answer.
I know it's my turn.
It's Tony's turn, and then Pete, and then we'll start a new stack.
fall asleep over here and I might have forgotten my
Been
question.
waiting.
Tony Tavalli from down the road here. The first one for Guy, on what Dave had to say about a moratorium. Your answer was 5 or 10 minutes on the DECs, which, and force majeure in that way, but this moratorium actually puts a stop on them. They can't do Trent Black River or anything in this town under this moratorium. This is not a de facto moratorium. This is a full ban stop, correct? This moratorium doesn't allow anything as far as gas drilling. So they can't come into the town and do partial, and you can't use the argument that they're using to defend that force majeure, which to me looks like maybe they could use force majeure under this ban and possibly extend these. I don't know. It's a concern, especially if they're ending, which is ours will. And
Tony, let me just make sure I'm understanding this. So are
the
you
question to Guy is,
okay.
because his answer seemed to be more about the DEC's moratorium, that this is actually a stoppage, a complete stoppage for gas, oil, and solution mining in this town, everything. So there is no room for them to do anything. So force majeure seems like it's more likely here under this moratorium than it would be under the DECs, because they can drill vertical and do small fracking and whatnot in the state. So that would be my question to you. And because I fell asleep, I lost most of my train of thought here. But on the rest of what, as far as a moratorium to do these things, that if we were to accept drilling here, we absolutely need to do these things. And we actually do need the time to do them, because we spent 4 years screwing around arguing over whether we're going to do this or not. We're going to ban or we're not going to ban, and we spent an awful lot of time fighting about it instead of actually doing this work. So I'm not against taking the time to do these things. I'm not very happy that we spend so much time arguing. So I'd just like to put forward that, I have given you a no on this, but I am for doing these, but I think we ought to actually get to work and do them. And in the idea that we will drill, whether we do or not, but if we don't focus on that, we can't really get that right. If you want to go into a ban, aren't we wasting our time doing any of this? If we believe a ban will stop it, then that whole list is a waste of time, and we don't need that. Is that correct? But mostly the question is to Guy Crow. The other one is to Don, whether...
You did sleep your part of it.
Yeah. Tony, your second question, I think Don did just address, which is that that the moratorium is something that we need while we do all of these other things, and that a ban alone doesn't give us the kind of protections that those things do. So we need both. Or potentially need. We need time to discuss all of it.
As far as they can use the town for other things.
Right. Even if there were a ban, we still would need to do an industrial site plan review and critical environmental areas and all of that. And a ban wouldn't prohibit those other things necessarily. So that we do need to address all those other things in addition to discussing whether or not to go forward on a ban. But as to the first thing about force majeure, if I'm understanding, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding where you're coming from on this, is that I think what you're saying is that this current draft moratorium precludes any kind of draft bill, any
this
kind of gas development.
The town is proposing.
Yeah, this proposed draft precludes any kind of gas development, whether it's vertical or hydrofrac.
So that would be a complete stoppage.
And would that therefore invoke force majeure
Correct.
more so than if they were allowed sometimes but not others? Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Your turn.
If when finally adopted, it's a complete ban on, let's say, vertical and horizontal, traditional and non-traditional drilling, then the force majeure question becomes a little more complicated. I'm not sure my answer changes, but you have a point. One of the issues that comes up in any type of restriction, whether it's based on a zoning prohibition or lot setbacks, etc., is what were you precluded from? Were you absolutely prohibited, or did you simply have to do a little more work than someone else who was in the right zone or was in a different location? So, one, that's a question the town board's going to have to deal with, is what type of drilling do they want to ban, or do they just want to blanket over all gas drilling? But two, there is a provision in this local law that says that you can get a hardship exemption, basically a variance procedure. So if they don't avail themselves of the ability to attempt to get the administrative remedy, it is a slightly more difficult argument for them to make that force majeure is automatically extended, because they did have an opportunity to do something, they just chose not to do it, and you get into a whole battery of sub-legal questions. But your point is correct. It would not be as simple a case as I stated if it were a complete ban. But on one hand, I never said it was black and white. The second question is, if there's the second aspect of that is telling is, let's say, hypothetically, the town does a moratorium and then it does in fact do a ban, whether a partial ban or a total ban or industrial site plan review, which will end up theoretically discouraging it in certain areas and encouraging it in certain other areas based on whatever the site plan review parameters are. If you own land, let's take a clean example of there's a total or partial ban and it touches your lease, so that even though there may be a better or stronger force majeure argument for a driller to have made, ultimately they're not allowed to drill anyway, so what's the point of the extension? And that's a doctrine called as futility. You don't get an extension of time if there's no purpose for the underlying extension. So your question might only come up in terms of how gray the answer is if there is not a ban that follows the moratorium. If there's a moratorium and then there is no ban or prohibition, then you have a force majeure question, which is going to look at, okay, well, you were prohibited during this time frame. How much time was left on your lease? Did you have a good faith interest in developing your lease and putting it into a secondary term? This is one of the issues that's coming up in one of my cases, is the company saying they had a very, very early lease, a 2006 lease. This was in Cayuga County. They had a 2006 lease, and they're trying to say that for 4 months in 2011, they were precluded from, in the last 4 months of their lease, drilling. Well, anyone who knows anything about the process of doing seismic testing, doing all the permit, you can't possibly get an ability to drill in 4 months. It can't happen. You just can't do it. So it's sort of a specious argument. So the question is very complicated in terms of how much time was left on your lease, and what was the effect of this 1 year impact, and did you or did you not, Mr. Driller or Mr. Oil Company or conglomerate of whoever it is, did you avail yourself of the opportunity to drill by going through the specific review process that the town set forth, which in reality is not really any different in terms of identifying the impacts than the state makes you go through. Well, it's simpler than what you have to go through to get a state permit. But all that information you already have if you're applying for a state permit. Why don't you just give it to the town and see if they said yes? So you're right on part of the question, but the ultimate result I don't think changes a lot, because they still have a process where they can go through and try to get permission and exemption. And it really will turn on the exact language that's adopted in the final moratorium. As I understand, we're still in the draft phase. This is nowhere near final. But that is a point for them to consider. Do you want to impact vertical drilling with this moratorium, or do you want to exempt it? That's something the town board will have to consider, because it could arguably have some impact on leases that may be expiring that, let's say, are going to expire within the last 6 months of that year stretch. The ones that are within 6-7 months of expiring, I doubt will have an impact on them, because the companies are either trying to get a permit or they're not. You can't run that process through in a few months. So for a legal perspective, that's my answer. I think you have a good point, but I don't think it makes a huge difference in the long run.